If we're to believe the believers, gold is on its way out. Bitcoin has dethroned gold, and this is all just a shiny rock again. Well, I have a few thoughts on that. Last week, Jerome Powell made a comment about Bitcoin competing with gold. Specifically, what he said was that Bitcoin is just like gold. Let me set this down so I can get this right. He said it's virtual, it's digital. People are not using it as a form of payment or as a store of value. It's highly volatile. It's not a competitor for the dollar. It's really a competitor for gold. Now we could pick that apart, but really all he meant to say was that Bitcoin did not compete with the dollar. But the comment made it onto the gold and silver scene with a little bit of spin. And with Bitcoin hitting that $100,000 mark, there's a lot of noise that comes with it. Now don't get me wrong here, $100,000 Bitcoin is a big deal, but now we get the return of the comparison. Bitcoin is better than gold, or you should have bought Bitcoin instead. And more than that, if Bitcoin is pumping and Bitcoin's digital gold, well then gold must be done with its rally, right? So look, anything I say here about gold being different than Bitcoin or better than Bitcoin for one reason or another will mostly just be preaching to the choir. Bitcoin, it just don't go around here. But with Bitcoin pumping and pro-crypto administration on the way in, you at least have to stop just for a minute and wonder if this could kill the rally. Okay, that was a fun thought, but here's what's really going on. But first, let's get a quick shout out to Summit Metals. They've got great deals on gold and silver, and now they have great deals on pre-33 gold too. Now, great deals, that's subjective. I encourage you to go check that out and make that call for yourself, but I think we'll agree. SummitMetals.com. So what were we saying about Bitcoin? Well, Bitcoin is having a minute, and it really took off and gold flipped the other way. Timing lined up. That was because the election news affected them differently. But if you think Bitcoin pumping means that gold is dumping, well, we should probably stop and take a look at gold, because we just saw gold above $2,700 again for the first time in weeks. Silver hit $32, and that's a big deal too, because there are a few things working against the metals right now. Mostly it's just what happened with the election, a little bit of uncertainty, but one would be Fed policy. We're seeing that this morning. Now, only what we're seeing today has lined up with what everybody expected to see. 2.7% year-over-year inflation rate, so we're not seeing any real fireworks. And beyond the news from this morning, we're seeing three big factors driving the gold and silver rallies this year, and what's causing the rally is always going to be more important than the specific price right now. So in addition to interest rate policy, we have central bank demand, and then what's happening in the world. So geopolitical stress. Now, Bitcoin possibly sapping some of the capital away from the gold market. Well, that's just not one of those big factors. Now, like I mentioned earlier, the timing lined up. It might seem like it is, but that's a short-term thing. Now, the first three factors have been persistent this year. That doesn't mean they've always been on. They've ebbed and they've flowed. So we need to look at what's going on at each of those three right now. And that pushback to $2,700, well, that's going to make more sense. It's going to be easier to gauge whether that sticks. Right now, you might say China resuming gold buying is the big one at the moment. I told you Friday, maybe Saturday, that China resumed its purchases, and that single bit of news alone sent prices up and probably changed sentiment widely for traders. We don't even know if it's going to continue, but that news is big. This goes straight to demand, of course, and there probably isn't much we need to discuss here that we haven't already said, but the interesting part is the interest. So central banks are still buying lots of gold. Lots of gold, that doesn't sound real technical, so way more than average. Switching gears back to interest rates. Prior to today's inflation report, 87% of traders expected a 25 basis point cut. Now it's 97%. Now, if the Fed decides to cut interest rate again next week, gold and silver will definitely like that. But if the Fed decides instead to slow its roll, not cut rates in December, well, that's a big surprise, and that's going to have a different kind of impact. Now, anyone paying attention to the rate decisions and their impact on gold right now is already aware of how direct this link is. Now, I think the whole idea, though, of why interest rates matter needs a little bit of explaining. The impact from interest rates is very specific. Gold and silver have no yield. So they do better in a low interest environment because there's just less competition from high yield safe alternatives. So like bonds, high yield savings, things like that. Now this is a very direct impact, the most important impact, and definitely the one that we should all be clear on. There are side effects, though, that go along with it, and those side effects can be misinterpreted as the primary impact. So for one, we see USD performance on the DXY impact gold and silver as well, because gold and silver are dollar denominated, and a shift in relative currency strength and exchange rates can make gold or silver more or less expensive in other regions. So let's just pick an example. If the US dollar is strong relative to the Australian dollar, sorry Aussies, gold costs more there. Same thing in reverse, the opposite is true as well. Now this relative strength of a currency and its ability to buy gold based on the exchange rate is a real thing. I see comments from people saying gold price doesn't change, just the value of the dollar that buys it. No, maybe that's where this comes from. I don't even know. Conceptually, the idea checks out. If we went back in time with an ounce of gold, we could buy some of the same things for that same piece of gold. So a nice suit might cost an ounce of gold. Same as today, but the link there is only theoretical, and these swings in dollar strength are more about yields and currency exchange rates than some direct link to how much gold it can buy. Now, I had 3 things on my list of things giving legs to the rally, that third being geopolitics. And this is a recurring thing, so I don't even know. What do we want to talk about here? What's happening in Korea? Maybe Assad being ousted in Syria? That's a huge deal, and it's having some impact on the price of gold, but in terms of its impact on the extended rally, it's just one example. I mean, it's new. The more important part here is that we're always going to see some of this. And the rush to gold as a safe haven when things get sticky, well, that's not going away because Bitcoin exists. Now, none of that's to say that Bitcoin has no impact on gold. I think it does, but not in these big ways, and that was the original point. Now, it doesn't divert momentum from those 3 big things affecting gold price that I mentioned. It doesn't change the fact that lower interest rates, lower competition with gold. It doesn't change the central bank gold buying demand. And it does not change the fact that capital flows into gold when these regional wars crop up. People don't rush into Bitcoin for stability. So if you're seeing people in the comments saying Bitcoin is the way, or you're wondering if there's some truth to this idea that Bitcoin is going to kill the gold rally, well, I guess it's important to consider that Bitcoin is in the midst of some of its biggest news ever, and gold is still on the way up. So let's call it good there. Just for the sake of comedy, let us know if you think Bitcoin is better than gold, if you think it's going to kill the rally. Maybe you're giving up entirely on gold and silver and going all in on Bitcoin. Let us know. And then while you're in the comments, be sure to hit that like button if you found any of this interesting. Be sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on if you want to hear more on the topic. And if you're still here, thanks again for watching. I always appreciate your time. Take care.